If I lost all my watercolor supplies and had to start over, these are the exact materials that I would buy again. They're the ones that I trust most. Some of them I've used for years and they've made the biggest difference in my watercolor portraits. Because with watercolor, your materials really matter. Let's go through them one by one. Quick note, this video was highly requested because you often ask what I use. You definitely do not need these exact brands. Budget alternatives exist, and I'll be sharing deeper guides on brushes, paper, paints soon. If you don't want to miss those, hit subscribe. Every single painting starts with the drawing. I will first start with all of my essential drawing supplies. I'm absolutely in love with this Blackwing pencil. It has very rich graphite. It is slightly shiny, but depending on which kind you are using. This one just helps me to sketch a bit more frequently because sketching with it is such a pleasant activity. It has a very wide eraser here. That's pretty gentle to the kind of paper that I'm using for sketching, so I highly recommend this one. With the Blackwing pencil, I absolutely love this eraser that I bought with it from Jackson's Art Supplies. It makes your pencil extra sharp and extra long. I do use mechanical pencils for sketching on a watercolor paper. That's because the Blackwing smears on a watercolor paper. Mechanical pencil in general helps you to create lines that are slimmer, and I find them more suitable for fighting the texture of a watercolor paper. I use either 0.5 or 0.7 is even more comfortable for me, and into both I like to add the pentel graphite, so it is always 2B. Never mind which size of the mechanical pencil lead you're using, I prefer 2B to everything else. So HB pencils I don't like, they're too hard for me, I can barely see them and they scratch the paper slightly. I like pentel the most, they have highest quality graphite from what I've tried. Then I have the erasers. Erasers are so important for watercolor painting, and that is because you need a soft eraser to not mess up your watercolor paper texture. I do not do the whole thing where I sketch to a separate paper and then trace the sketch to watercolor paper. I sketch directly because that saves me so much time and makes the sketch a bit more fresh. For that I was looking for the softest erasers that I could find. Faber-Castell is the brand for these two. Kneaded eraser, super soft. You can see it in every single one of my videos, and I use it to lighten the sketch and then just get rid of all of the smudged graphite. It is beautiful, soft, and it also lasts a long time. It's such an important tool for a watercolor artist. So the dust-free eraser from Faber-Castell helps me get rid of all of these lines that are too dark, and the kneadable eraser would not get rid of them, but it's still gentle enough, so I only use it when I absolutely need to clean up the paper completely. It's a great eraser. And last one is precision eraser. So this is basically an eraser in a pencil. You can sharpen it just like regular pencil, but the tip, it helps you to erase around details. It's very handy. I use it quite a lot for portraits. It is cheap. It's about 1 to 2 euros for this one. Besides sketching on a watercolor paper, I do like to sketch in a separate sketchbook. I like this one. I always buy it. Every time I run out, I buy a new one from this brand. It is Art Creation by Talents. It's super cheap. I can't imagine how they make money with selling this because it's about 10 to 12 euros, I think. This is A4 size, so pretty big. It has a lot of pages. I think every 2 years I need a new one, and a very high quality paper, so I think I showed you during the sketchbook tour. I do prefer this one over anything else that I've tried. My favorite watercolor sketchbooks, and this is a big topic because I get quite a lot of sketchbooks to test. Some of them are pretty beautiful, but I did not test enough to be confident in recommending them. But these two I'm absolutely confident. One is pulp and one is cotton. So I've already filled these two sketchbooks. Both were from Koval sketchbook brand. These are handmade sketchbooks made in Poland, and these are made from Arches, Saunders and Fabriano paper. So they use the highest quality paper that's available, and they make a beautiful sketchbook out of it. The sketchbooks lay flat, and They're really awesome to work with. Paper is high quality, which helps you to not alternate your own watercolor technique, and you can do what you normally do for a large painting. You can practice the same technique in your sketchbook. Of course, the downside is the price. The price gets higher for these sketchbooks just because the paper is the highest quality paper, but also because they're handmade. But I still think it's worth it. This is the new one that I just got. I did buy that myself, the sketchbook, because I was just remembering all of the great moments that I had with this one, and I had to order a new one. I was missing that sketchbook very much. It's filled with Saunders paper, which is my favorite. I loved working in that sketchbook. It has a cold press texture, and look at this beautiful color. It's absolutely worth every euro. I think I paid with shipping about 85 to 90 euros for this sketchbook. I do not regret it, but I realized that it's not for everybody. Another sketchbook that's less pricey and is from pulp paper but still high quality is the Strathmore 400 series watercolor sketchbook. The pulp paper and cotton paper is always different. You know, the pulp has its own advantages and disadvantages. Main advantage is the price and also the vividness of the colors, but for sketchbook work, if you just want to practice and get things going, then this sketchbook allows you to start quickly without having to pay like 90 euros. I think this one is about 35 to 37, depending on your location, of course. I love both of them. I recommend to beginners, to advanced painters who have a higher budget. Next stop is my favorite watercolor papers. I do want to make a separate video and compare different brands. I never recommend anything that I did not use enough, but these two brands have been in my artistic life for years and are my go-to papers. So this is Archie's. It's 300 GSM, 100% cotton paper. This is actually the size that I like to work in, which is 31 by 41 centimeters or 12 by 16 inches. Anything smaller is just too small for me anymore. And this is gorgeous paper. Used it for portraits, but nowadays I prefer to do floral paintings. Anything that I work wet in wet, predominantly I use my Archies for. But then Winsor & Newton Professional, cold press, 100% cotton, so basically same specs, but I use this one for portraits. And even if your paper has the same specs, same parameters, they react very differently to color and to water. I find that Winsor & Newton is a bit more reactive paper. You have to get used to it. Archies is kind of an old body. It will forgive you everything, but this one, it lets you know when you made a mistake. But on the other hand, once you get used to it, the color looks spectacular on this paper. On Archies, it fades away slightly. You have to test the paper with large washes of paint to be able to see the color switch and color difference. So this paper is just what I'm used to for portraits, and I've been experimenting with different techniques on this one. Either one that you will get, one or the other, you will do a good job, and the portraits and the paintings that you will do will look fabulous, will look fantastic. Just allow a bit more tries with this paper before you throw it away, because I know that it was very annoying at the start. Took maybe 5 to 6 paintings until I got the hang of how it behaves. And before I jump into my favorite watercolor brushes, I just wanted to quickly share something I'm really excited about. I'm hosting a 5-week watercolor portrait challenge starting this Sunday, February 1st, 2026. The goal of the challenge is to help you get better at watercolor portraits, build momentum in a way that feels structured and doable. We will paint 5 expressive faces in 5 weeks, step by step, and we'll also build the palette together. In week 1, we will start with 4 colors, and each week we will add one new versatile color until you end up with a reliable, universal 8-color palette that's easy to mix and works beautifully for portraits and many other watercolor subjects. Each week includes the full process: reference planning, a loose sketch, a quick color mixing exercise, and then a complete paint-along portrait demo, so you're never left guessing what to do next. The challenge will run on both Patreon and Skillshare. I will leave my Skillshare link below. There's always a free trial available. And if you can't join right at launch, no worries, you can do the challenge anytime at your own pace on either platform. I would love to see you there. It was incredibly difficult to point out like some of my favorite brushes because I have over 100 brushes in my studio and I regularly switch them, experiment with them. I promised you a more in-depth brush guide video which is coming maybe next month. This is just the ones that I use all the time. I absolutely love and I could recommend even though some of them are really pricey. I'll start with the essentials, sable brushes, round brushes. These two are the ones, if I did not have any other brushes, would be absolutely 100% competent in creating a portrait. The entire painting with these brushes could be done easily. Both are Winsor & Newton series 7 brushes. This is finest sable brush number 7 and number 5. You can even get 4 instead of 5 if you have a budget, for these brushes are very, very expensive. I consider them being absolutely worth it. They have a sharp tip so I can do details with them. They are super soft, so the technique that's very difficult with watercolor is the softening of the edges. That is very easy to do with this kind of brush. I consider them my number one tool for painting. Then there are brushes that you don't really need, you can substitute if you want. I absolutely love for large washes and these splatters effects and for painting larger works. This flat brush from Herend, this is 6 centimeter brush, so quite thick, and pure Squirrel round brush. This is Petit Gris from Winsor & Newton number 6. Both of these help me a lot when I need to do backgrounds, like large washes. Either one or the other can do a great job. From brushes that are sable and very, very dependable, but these are flat ones, which I sometimes like to use just for the shape of the brush stroke, which is quite interesting, is the Princeton Neptune brushes square wash. This is 3/4 inch and 1/2 of an inch. Then there are more Princeton brushes. This Aqualit Princeton line is made out of synthetic bristles. This is a round brush and a stroke brush, which means it's a flat brush. Sometimes I use them for signing my paintings, for a lot for cleanup, because you can gently just rub some excess pigment out with these brushes, which is not always great to do with sable brushes. But the round brush, even though it's synthetic, is very helpful for details as well. I like to use them a lot. One last brush from Princeton. This is Neptune also, contains sable bristles. Number 8, this is travel brush. This is a round brush that is super soft, but I like to use it for studio work sometimes. When I'm on the go and need to take one brush, then this is my go-to. Absolutely love it. And look how beautiful and small it is. You can just package it even if the bag that you're carrying is very small. And the last brushes is my calligraphy brushes. These are inexpensive, unbranded calligraphy brushes. You can find calligraphy brushes pretty much everywhere, even in stationery shops, not just art supply shops. They help me create textures, do like paint hair, bristles. But if I was really on a tight budget, that I could paint my entire painting with these, because they also can hold quite a lot of water. They're just lovely to work with. I don't know, maybe one costs €2 or €3. Very cheap brushes, worth mentioning for watercolor. Next, stop watercolor paints. These are all of the brands that I'm using right now and have been using for many years. Many people ask me what brand of paints I'm using. I use different brands, but it's always artist grade watercolor paint. There's not as much of a difference between high quality artist brands, because sometimes they tend to use the same pigments and they're all transparent. They basically all contain just pigment and gum arabic. There's no fillers, and all of these paints are more or less in the higher price group. My favorite paints that I've painted for so many years is Daniel Smith. I'm obsessed with their Bloodstone Genuine, which is mineral color that I tend to use a lot for my backgrounds. I just did not find anything that looks quite like this one. Winsor & Newton Professional. These are Sennelier. They use honey instead of gum arabic, or maybe it's honey and something, but their consistency is more liquid than any other brand and it's absolutely fantastic. I just love them. Not all of them, just like from every brand, I think you can find weaker paint and you can find stronger ones. Whenever I tested, they were absolute gorgeous to work with. If you're on a budget but you still want as high quality paints as possible, then I would recommend you to search for Rembrandt. In my studio we use Van Gogh, which is their student line, but I tested the Rembrandt, the artist line, and they're very good. They're very comparable with all of these and much cheaper. There's price difference of about €2 between these and, let's say, Sennelier. Maybe that's different in your local area, so pick any of these brands. But the main brand that I am working with now and building my palette from is Schminky Herend paints. These are paints that are made in Germany. I've been using them for years with all of these other brands, and I actually wrote to Schminky to send me some of the paints for testing, and they were so generous. They sent me about 20 tubes, and I'm currently in the process of building my palette and all of the pigments that I use from their line. Like I mentioned, they're high quality, but they also have these super granulation, beautiful colors that I just wanted to test all of them. They're absolute pleasure to work with. Next stop is palettes. Since I use mostly tubes, I need some surface or a palette to pour the paint into. I do not like pens, but I use these palettes as my permanent studio setup, and I sort of take the tube from the paint and poured it into my palette. Usually I work with it right away, but I also let it dry, and the paint is reusable. If you use a high quality paint, then they always will re-wet within 2 minutes. So when I start a painting session, I just pour clean water here, wait 3 minutes, and usually the paint is workable. There's nothing like fresh paint squeezed straight from the tubes, because sometimes even in watercolor you need that creamy consistency, which pens cannot give you. That's why I prefer tubes, because they're more versatile. This is a plastic palette, which I absolutely love. I've been using for half a year. Normally I would not prefer mixing on plastic, because that is not 100% awesome mixing surface. Porcelain is much better, but the plastic is light, it's washable, and I just like how this palette has so much mixing space, and this extra mixing space helps a lot. Oftentimes I just paint with this in my hand. This one is the palette that contains the maximum amount of paints that I've ever used, so that's 18 wells, and then I have this one with only 13. There's a beautiful one that is metallic palette, so the mixing surface is a little better. It doesn't beat that as much as the plastic ones, and it fits 13 colors, which is a bit more limited than this one. I like limited palettes because too many colors on my palette confuses me. It makes me overthink stuff and mix everything into one giant mess. But on the other hand, the metallic palettes, sometimes they rust, and they're not as great for transport. This palette, it seals very well. I've used it in the plein air a couple of times, and I did not have troubles of getting my bag dirty when I was moving from place to place. Don't know, lately I've been opting out for this one and prefer this one. This was also pretty expensive. I think it was about 25 to 30 euros to get it from Amazon, but I still think it's a good palette for the studio work. I also use porcelain plates a lot. These are not for eating. I just have a collection of these in the studio. They were cheap plates from IKEA, bowls, even if I need larger amount of paint for backgrounds or large surface. I like to mix on them, especially when I do portraits or paintings with limited palette. Then I don't get confused with having all of these here. I put that one aside and just squeeze in my paint here and just use a couple of these plates for mixing. That's something that's very helpful. Do not use colored mixing surfaces. Always use white ones, because you can't see paint on anything else. And there are a few of extra materials that I use for my process. I always have to have them by my side. If not, then the process is not so smooth. So I decided to include them in this video. First and foremost is the sponge. This is just a regular sponge. You need to place it in clean water and then squeeze the water out so that it gets nice and workable. And then you can release extra moisture from your brush to the sponge. It's very helpful. It helps you not to overwork your painting, and thanks to this way of working, you mess up and create less blooms in your watercolor painting. Of course, that you can use paper towels, which I did for many years, but now I've replaced most of this with the sponges. I also take it anywhere, and I also sometimes cut them in half so they don't take up so much space on my table. Then I have scalpel, which I often use for scratching out some highlights in the end. I prefer using scalpel to using a gouache paint, because watercolor then looks a bit more fresh and airy. With gouache paint, I do not think that that's bad, to combine the techniques, but if I can scratch it off with scalpel, I prefer to do that. This basically serves the same purpose, but the spatula, I use it for cutting the paper from the block. I use it a lot in the studio, it's just a handy tool, and also for scratching off some of the highlights as well, but this works only when the paint is still sort of wet. This looks like it does not belong in this video, but it does, because I got a lot of eraser bits on my table, so with this one I just clean everything smoothly. It makes me feel good. I use it a lot when transitioning from the drawing to the painting process. This is actually Faber-Castell and it's especially made for cleaning up after drawing sessions. Let us know down below in the comments which supplies are your favorite, which ones do you recommend, so that we get some inspiration from you as well. So those are my favorite art supplies for watercolor portraits. They help keep my process smooth and make it easier to get beautiful results. But even the best materials won't do the work for you. What really makes the difference is knowing how to use your palette confidently. So in this next video, I will show you how to mix a few key colors into powerful, easy to remember skin tone mixes, and that will save you a ton of trial and error. I will see you there. Bye!